If something is false, he calls it out, even if it means alienating the entire medical community. He doesn't care. He cares about the truth.
Marlon Perkins put my father on this path early on. That's ultimately what led to my father making the discovery many, many years later of cystic fibrosis.
I was excited to help kids with cystic fibrosis. And they fired me.
He's never been tied to a certain set of research or a food company or a drug company or the dollar. He's just been committed to his heart and what he knew.
They would actually follow us and hand out petitions, and they actually had people arrested. It was quite the fight back in the early days.
He's not going to be stopped by the FDA. No one wants to take on the FDA. No one wants to go through that battle.
I've seen my father deal with a lot of blows that would cause most people to just curl up in a ball and quit.
I don't care if he gets knocked down another 20 times. He will get up that 21st time.
I give lectures all over the world. People every month come up to me and tell me how I saved their lives, how the information saved their mother, how it saved their kids. You cannot pay for that. You cannot pay for that. That's worth everything.
Wow, Dad, 20 years.
20 years.
Could you imagine that we'd be here tonight 20 years ago?
Well, I actually have a great story about that. But
Who knew?
who knew?
Who knew?
But here we are.
But no, honestly, I mean, can you give us a short version? Did you really believe 20 years ago when I came down in my Forerunner with my sister, my brother-in-law, my 2 weenie dogs, and a baby that it would lead to this?
Well, I was asked that question 24 years ago. 24 years ago. How big do you think you're going to get? And I said, well, we want to get and take over the biggest network marketing companies in the world. And these people, because we needed to build an army to get this information out just to save kids. That was the whole idea. And we needed an army. One little short guy couldn't do it by himself, so we needed an army. And it's time to call in the cavalry. And these people were all kind of union people, and they fell on their back and laughed and kicked in the air and laughed and laughed and laughed. And you know, today, these same people are saying, remember what you said? We believe you now. Yeah. Whoa!
So over that 20 years, over the last 20 years of Youngevity, you know, I was asked what things really stand out as like just amazing moments or accomplishments and things. And you know, what really stands out to me is as a major accomplishment of this company, what sets this company apart from other direct selling companies are the FDA health claim petitions. And you really drove those, obviously with Jonathan Emord's help and all of that. But I mean, as Michelle said in that video, nobody wants to go up against the FDA, and you didn't bat an eye, you didn't blink. Why was that important to get that health freedom information or that health information out and maintain health freedom to you? Why was that so important?
Well, number one, when you know how to save kids with the discovery of the disease like cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, these sort of things, and you get fired for it, you know that the system really isn't in it for the truth. And so sometimes you just have to be like David out of the Bible and just get in there and go after the big boys no matter what. And that's what it was going to require. That's what we were going to do. And if I may, I'll throw this in. When we started, after I got fired, we started a little company, and we were doing great, and we wanted to go public. This was back then. And Arthur Anderson, big auditing company, we had him come in to audit us so we could go public. This was just before, this was like a couple of months before we started Youngevity. And they fired me again because they wanted my money. I was a distributor. I was a very successful distributor. I was making a big 6-figure income every month. And so this guy wanted my money. And so they got me fired. And we had our first meeting in Santa Cruz, California, just 6 months later. And it was all based on radio and getting information out. And people were coming by the hundreds to come to this meeting, but nobody was coming in the door because the Arthur Andersen employees had hired 3 guys who were all over 250 pounds each to turn people away and say the meeting's been canceled. And so I had to say to the guy who was hosting the meeting, who by the way was Clint Eastwood's driver, and said,
right.
yeah, Dio.
Yeah, Dio.
I said, Dio, we need the cavalry. I can take one of those. I can't take 3 of them by myself. I said, I want you to call 911, get 5 squad cars here, tell them there's going to be a riot, there's going to be deaths everywhere. We need 5 squad cars with men armed to the teeth. And I just prayed that he remembered the message. So I took on the guy in the middle who was passing out the papers, and we were on the ground fighting. These other 2 were kicking me in the ribs, broke all my ribs on this side, gave me a concussion. And here come the 5 squad cars. Thank you, Jesus, and thank you, Dio. Woo, woo, woo. They cuffed him, and to make a long story short, we sued him in federal court shortly thereafter on the RICO laws, which are racketeering. They were trying to destroy us physically so they could take over our company. And they settled out of court, in federal court. They settled, and that's the money we got to start Youngevity. Hooah!
So tell our audience a little bit about how Dead Doctors Don't Lie came to be. Did you sit down? Did you script it out? Was it over a period of years? How did Dead Doctors Don't Lie? How did that come?
Okay. Well, basically, I was out giving lectures, and the sort of chapters for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation were having me come and lecture locally because they wanted to know what was going on.
What years was this? What year?
Oh, that had to be 1978. 1978.
Really? It goes back that far?
Oh, yeah, 1978. I was working for Emory University in the Yerkes Primate Center. That's where I made the discovery, and they're the ones that fired me in Atlanta, Georgia. And so giving these lectures, and 2020 is following us. One of these days you're going to see this. We actually, Steve finally tracked it down and got the video from the 2020 interviews I did back in those days. And we're doing these things, and it became apparent that this is when we needed the Army. And I began to create things that were sort of pre-made that everybody needed, and throw in a secret sauce for the various diseases. And I know I'm getting off track here.
No, that's okay. But it's 1978. Let's try to bring it to 1980 something.
Well, that audio was recorded in 1993.
Yes. Now.
Yes.
But I know you had been lecturing, obviously, all along up to that point. But.
Okay. So I actually had retired. I was making good money. I retired and moved down to Houston, Texas, where I met Milan. Huh? Sugarland. And I kept going to the medical library and living with, Jeremiah on the boat called the Elixir. We were living on this boat out in the lake in Houston, Texas. And I went in, and it's dawning on me that people they always say, I got to ask my doctor, you're dying, you're on 14 prescription medications. I got to ask my doctor about this nutrition. And says, well, how good are doctors? Really, how good are they? How long do they live? So while I was in the medical school library there in Houston, Texas Medical Center, I just grabbed a whole armload of the Journal of the American Medical Association, put it on the table. I went to the obituary pages, and I just took the first 200 obituaries, added up the age, and then divided by 200. I got 58. 58, that's the average lifespan of medical doctors in America. So I did it the other way. I took the other end, and I went 200, added up, and got 57.9. Okay, 58. And so I started making photocopies of these obituaries of doctors and handing them out at meetings. Look, why are you going to these guys? Look at that, they're dying at 58. And there was a football player who had a kid with muscular dystrophy from Seattle, Washington. In Seattle Seahawks he was playing for. I was having a meeting down in Florida And he flies all the way from Seattle down to Florida, and I'm handing out these obituaries to doctors. You know, I love the ones that were sports medicine doctors dying of a heart attack while they're doing a marathon at age 35, cardiologists dying of a heart attack while they were in surgery and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm handing these obituaries out. And this guy got up, he's big, and we were in this auditorium with metal chairs, and he started throwing these metal chairs around. This big 300-pound football player, kind of like David Rutz's size, right? And he's throwing stuff around, and it was very noisy and very loud. And everybody, the 80 people who were in there huddling in the corner in fear for their lives. And I said, well, can I help you? And he says, I want to know why you're handing out obituaries of doctors when I'm here to find out how to save my son with muscular dystrophy. And I don't know where it came from, but out of my mouth came, only dead doctors don't lie.
Oh, wow.
And
I
that's where
didn't
it
know
came
that. So you went onto the radio.
Started the radio 23 years ago.
You shared the Dead Doctors Don't Lie lecture, I would say, or message.
Yeah, we do a monologue based on the newspaper stories on health that day or that week.
And was it a complete stranger that recorded it and made it into an audio cassette?
No, it was actually one of our distributors. Let's see, Barbara from Kansas City. It was actually recorded in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And it was just my regular lecture. And she was a horse woman. She had all these horses. And one of the guys who worked for a group was by the name of, they called it the Committee Against Medical Fraud. And they dogged me. They followed me all around. And of course, you know. You know who I'm talking about.
Right.
These bad guys, John Renner and Victor Herbert and Stephen Barrett and everything. And Barbara, she's a big woman. She's 6'3", a couple 100 pounds. And we're up lecturing there, where I actually made this recording. And he's handing out papers saying that I'm a quack and don't listen to me and everything. We're in the third floor meeting room. And she picks him up by the belt and by the scruff of the neck and throws him down 3 flights of stairs. True story.
And where's Victor Herbert and John Renner now?
Let's see. Well, John Renner is dead. Victor Herbert's dead. Stephen Barrett is in the basement of his house, and if he's still alive, and his desk was an old door.
Cheryl.
Okay, so
And
back
look
to
at
health
us.
freedom.
You never know where the questions are going to go.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan, they didn't tell me what they were going to ask me.
So when you first discovered that case of cystic fibrosis working for Yerkes in the rhesus
Yes.
monkey, I mean, I was a child and grew up hearing about these stories and read about them in Dead Doctors Don't Lie from your perspective. I lived them as a teenager, obviously, and it's just amazing, just reliving all of that stuff. And then Scott Salick was able to get some of that very, very old video footage of news stories, and you can still find all of this on Google, the original clippings of the newspaper articles and things. But as you said in that video, and you said here tonight, they fired you for going public with that information that you believed it to be. You didn't know the term back then, or it didn't exist, epigenetics, but you clearly pointed out to everybody that you believed it to be more than genetics, not solely genetics, that it was nutritionally induced, and you called out the specific nutrients back then, which are true today. Obviously, you still hold to that today. So, but they fired you for that. And I know there was a lot going on in your family life at that time, growing up at that time myself around then, and obviously. But you kept going. As I said in that video, you've taken some major challenges that would cause most people to just curl up in a ball and quit, do more than quit. You would, most people would absolutely quit, but you kept going. Why?
Well, again, it was to save the kids. You have something that can save kids. You just can't quit. And of course, I had saved myself from horrible disease, Tourette syndrome, when I was a kid. Started with the symptoms of Tourette syndrome when I was 4. I was disabled, really disabled by the time I was 9. And my mom and dad had taken me to 20 different doctors, and the 20th one,
And that's
Mary
all the
Jane-
doctors don't like
yeah,
the book, but let's stick to
Okay.
health freedom.
Okay.
Let's stick to the
Well,
last 20
okay,
years.
okay, when I was
Michelle always accuses me of going back too far.
Well, where does it start?
when I was fired, okay, when I was fired, now, just to make sure you know, when I made this discovery, I knew that I had something unusual. I looked it up in human medicine, animal, and cystic fibrosis, and I got permission to do biopsies on the other 24 baby monkeys in that colony that didn't have any genetic relationship to that one monkey. They were just the only genetic relationship. They were all monkeys, but they weren't brothers and sisters or cousins or anything like that. Every one of them had a different mother, father. They're all the same age, and they're raising these for NASA projects. They're training these monkeys to do things, and they give them a pellet, when they do the right thing, and they send them off into space. Well, I asked for permission to get a biopsy of those other 24 monkeys, and guess what? They all had cystic fibrosis, so I knew it was environmental. Well, fortunately, they had saved the blood from the adult monkeys every month for 6 years and had frozen it, just in case something like that had happened. And they had saved the blood every month for the baby monkeys who are now 6 months old, and froze it. And so I didn't have to get a grant to do those things. They had already done it for 6 years, but nobody had used the material. So I went back, and all I had to do was look at it and say, well, here's this one nutrient that's missing. And I went back into the animal industry and said, look at that. The deficiency of that nutrient causes cystic fibrosis in animals, but they didn't know that's what it was causing in animals because they were animal pathologists, not people pathologists. And so I took it to the powers that be. They sent it to the highest experts in pathology around the world in cystic fibrosis. They all agreed it was cystic fibrosis. Then I told them it was a monkey. They got excited at first. Oh, we can do laboratory animals now. I said, oh, yeah. How many you want? I can make 1,000 of them. I said, what? I said, yeah, it's not genetic. This is actually just a simple nutritional deficiency. Even the genetic marker is a nutritional deficiency. If I give the nutrient intravenously, the genetic marker will go in 24 hours. If I give it to them orally, the genetic marker will go in 2 weeks, and that's when they fired me.
And today, the field of epigenetics is the hottest research field there is.
Yes.
And what is epigenetics? I mean, besides your best-selling book, explain in simple terms, in 30 seconds or less. What is
30
it?
seconds or less.
There we go, there's the clock.
Well, the medical profession has thousands of failed medical theories going back thousands and thousands of years. In the 20th century, 21st century is no different. And whenever a doctor doesn't know what you have, or he's never seen what you have, he says it's genetic or autoimmune or something like that. He just gives it a name that insurance companies will pay for. If he says, I don't know, insurance companies won't pay him, right? So it's either genetic or autoimmune. Well, it turns out that your genes, DNA, RNA, and telomeres only control XX females, XY males, skin color, hair color, and eye color. Other than that, genes don't do anything. They don't cause any disease. Bad genes don't cause any disease. All the birth defects are caused by nutritional deficiencies of the embryo. And after 20,000 autopsies, I had figured that out. That's my 1,200-page book. And so when you know this, you know that you know it. And I was getting calls from the National Health Federation, which is an alternative health group, and they were the one that introduced me to the problems that the FDA did for people and so forth. And they had me come and lecture and tell my story. And that's when I met I had never heard of naturopathic doctors. That's when I met naturopathic doctors. They're, let's see, it was in Chicago. And it was one of those things where I was introduced to a whole new field, because I was working in hospitals and research laboratories. Clinton Miller, yeah. Clinton Miller. No, Dr. Schrauser
Came
also,
along a little later.
Same time.
Okay.
Dr. Schrauser actually was a week first, and he said, I want you to come and lecture to a bunch of Nobel Prize winners with your stuff, because he believed me. Dr. Schrauser believed me. And so that was a great vote of confidence from Dr. Schrauser, one of my heroes. The selenium expert. He got his PhD degree showing that selenium is an essential nutrient. And then Clinton Miller from the National Health Federation had me lecture to them in Chicago at the McCormick Center. And that's the first time I'd lectured to a group this big and told my story. And the naturopathic staff came and said, look, we want you to lecture at the naturopathic school. What are they? I didn't even know what they were. Now I are one.
So when you made that discovery of cystic fibrosis in the monkey at Yerkes, one of the key nutrients you specifically called out as one of the keys to this was a selenium deficiency. Now, this was in 1977, I believe.
1977, that's correct. They fired me in 78.
Okay, and so that's the way I remember it. So, but in 1977, 1978, selenium was not a recognized essential nutrient. You knew it was essential, but the government, the RDI, RDA, FDA, did not know or recognize selenium as an essential nutrient. Today, it's an essential nutrient. So your work, Dr. Schrauzer's work, other people's work, but your life's work contributed to selenium being a recognized essential nutrient.
That's correct. Back then, the medical system believed that selenium was one of the worst toxins in the world. They believe it yet today. You ask a medical doctor, what about selenium? Oh, you can't have selenium, it's too toxic. You get everything you need from your food. That's like saying, you don't need to put oil in your car. Just put dirt from Texas in your car. There's bound to be some oil in it. It's dirt from Texas. Bam! You're dead. You knew I was going to do that.
Okay, so in the last year and a half or so, you and Jonathan Emord teamed up again and went back to the FDA in regards to taking them to school in regards to selenium. And this was in regards to selenium being a required nutrient in baby food sold in the United States. It was not a required nutrient to be put into baby food in the US. So baby food sold on the shelf throughout the US did not contain selenium.
Yeah, pet food did, right? Dog food.
Yeah,
Dog food had.
Pet baby food.
Puppy food.
The
Puppy chow.
Canned milk for puppies.
Oh yeah, canned milk for puppies.
But dog food too, yes. But
all about the dogs.
so
Okay, now.
so but
Wait,
now
sorry.
but now the FDA recognized the error of their ways, and they have required that baby formula now contains, sold in the US, now contains selenium.
Now.
Which goes back to your statement about how important it is when you know that information in order to protect the most vulnerable, the children, the babies.
The story gets better.
Good.
Okay. Now somewhere, I believe it was 1989, Milan and I went to China, to Qishan province. And because we knew selenium deficiency was part of the syndrome of cystic fibrosis caused, there's a disease called Qishan disease in Qishan province, China, which is cardiomyopathy heart disease. It's a heart attack that athletes die from, the sudden heart death from athletes. And this province, they have thousands and thousands of kids die every month from this because this selenium is not in the soil there. And so I said, I'm going to be able to prove by going to Qishan province, China. Milan's family set all this up. They had connections, hospitals to give me the bodies and the slides and do the chemistries and everything. So I wanted to do 2,000 autopsies on these kids under the age of 10 that died of Qishan disease, cardiomyopathy heart disease, because it's a selenium deficiency. I said, if I'm correct, there's going to be some of these Chinese kids with cystic fibrosis. I said, if I could just find 25 or 30 of them out of 2,000, because it's supposed to be a genetic disease of Eastern Europeans, not of Asians. If I could find 25 kids, these Chinese kids with cystic fibrosis that have died of Qishan's disease, heart disease, a selenium deficiency, I'll be able to make my point. Well, I failed. I couldn't find 25. I found 595 out of 1,700 fully. 35% had cystic fibrosis, 100% had muscular dystrophy, and 200 under the age of 3 months had all died of crib death, SIDS. Because SIDS is due to a deficiency of selenium. It's a cardiomyopathy heart attack in these little babies. It's not getting tangled up in their blankets. It's not because they suffocated sleeping on their bellies. It's not because they were not sleeping in a cardboard box, which is their newest theory. How dumb are these people? Jeez. Okay, so what this is going to do, I hope you appreciate, because of Steve and you and Michelle and Richard Renton and myself and Jonathan Emore and all the stuff we did to get this into baby formula, we're going to eliminate SIDS. Huh? We're going to eliminate cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy. Now here's the next horror part of the story. When we realized that we could prove that this selenium deficiency also is the cause of muscular dystrophy, it's not unusual. Calcium deficiency causes 147 different diseases, so to have 3 or 4 or 5 different diseases caused by a selenium deficiency is not unusual. And so we gave the information. After working with some muscular dystrophy kids, we were able to help them eliminate all their symptoms, give their body what it needed to eliminate their symptoms effectively. They didn't have any more. All the genetic markers go away. We gave all this information to Jerry Lewis. He took it to the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation in 2011, and they fired Jerry Lewis. They stopped the telethon, and somebody needs to go to jail. That's it?
That's it?
Oh.
Well, no.
Whoever